Is a merger between the Big 12 and the ACC something that is inevitable at this point to create a Power 3? Maybe, but I hope not. This is the Big 12 Squad.
You're talking ball with the Big 12 Squad, sponsored by Game Time. From Oklahoma State to Utah, from Kansas State to BYU, from Houston to Texas Tech, it's the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network bringing you scoops, breakdowns, and the most comprehensive preview of the upcoming Big 12 weekend. Buckle up, it's the Big 12 Squad, and we have a seat for you. No hurt feelings and thin skin allowed. Squad up, you're part of the Big 12 Squad.
Happy Thursday night, everybody. Welcome to the Big 12 Squad. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. Thank you for making our entire family of shows your first listens every single day. You really start to learn how many guys in our squad are teaching and coaching. It is finally summer break. So many of them on vacation this week, tapped out, locked out. I think they'll join us throughout the show, though. We have Jake Hatch of Locked On BYU Cougars, Cody Stovall of Locked On Oklahoma State. Both of those guys covering all things Cougars and Cowboys. If you hit subscribe, we get to keep our jobs. Where we will start is a topic I hit pretty hard earlier this week. The ACC and the Big 12. Should they become friends in this Wild West that we call expansion and NIL and the transfer portal and realignment and all of the poppy SEO words that come with where college football sits today? Jake has been here. Cody, when did you start with Locked On?
November 2022.
And Jake's been here since nearly the beginning. So this three guys that have held on tight for over 3 years with the company and know a thing or two about how the Big 12 has evolved. I mean, when I first started, Jake wasn't involved in the conference, and they were just getting word that BYU would join the Big 12. And Cody was reckoning with Oklahoma and Texas leaving the Big 12, which ultimately was a positive when you consider their rivals and we don't like them. But that being said, you still lose two stalwarts. You still lose the Florida State and Clemson of what the Big 12 was. Thankfully, you backfill enough with solid programs that you feel comfortable. And to me, Hatch, we'll start with you. Comfortable, so we won't. We'll start with Cody Stovall, who's been here for a bit. Cody, comfortable enough, even more so than when those two schools left. I think we'd be doing ourselves a disservice to join the ACC in pretty much any manner at this point.
Well, Drake, I've always been on the side of the ACC as ASS, and there's always been a comparison between that conference and the Big 12.
Whoa. Hey, Hatch's listeners are here, too. You gotta
I'm totally okay with this. Keep it going.
My apologies.
You know what? Wait, Cody, what's worse than you saying that and Hatch's listeners being here is this. JT Westerfield.
Hey!
I almost swore on that. Love you too, Drake.
JT, topic of conversation Cody's hitting on now. The ACC and the Big 12, a possible merger, Cody.
Yeah, traditionally, I was not a fan of it, especially when you add SMU and they have to spend all the money. It just seemed kind of quirky to me, kind of rinky-dink, junior high level. But the Big Ten is kind of staying silent while the SEC is catching all of the flack, yet they're pretty much in cahoots. So why would we not have a partner in crime throughout this? I think that it actually does make sense for the Big 12 and the ACC to kind of find a way to have cooler heads prevail and take on the two big kids that are the bully in the schoolyard.
Okay, going back. Okay, one more time. What was the question again, Drake? I'm too distracted by your sunburn.
So, and the perm. I'm on island time.
There you go.
ACC, Big 12 merger. I put it this way on my show earlier this week, and we can go to both JT and Jake here. If I knew that in 4 years, Apple was going to get rid of the iPhone, I wouldn't buy stock in Apple today. If I knew in 4 years that they still had the Apple Watch, they still had AirPods, they still had AirTags, but they didn't have the iPhone, I would not today want to partner with them. It would not be an advantageous business decision for me. Understanding it's very likely Clemson and Florida State, the iPhone of the ACC, will not be in the league in 2030 due to the buyout decreasing. From there, I don't know if I want to hitch my wagon or buy stock or partner with a company that's about to lose its breadwinner.
Well, yeah. I'll just say this real quick, Drake. On that point, here's the deal. I would be telling the ACC, hey, we'll take on some of y'all when this does go down and you have your big dogs leave. But the Big 12 should not be looking to merge with the ACC in any way, shape, or form right now. Let things play out over the next 3, 4, 5 years and then see what you can do. But yeah, a merger at this juncture seems foolhardy at best.
The ACC and the Big 12 should pair up. They should not schedule any SEC teams in their non-conference games. They should simply say the whole point you guys try to make. And Greg Sankey last week. I mean, how ridiculous was that pamphlet that he tried to put out there and everything about saying this is the toughest conference and yada, yada, yada. And all he's trying to do is just cover the butts of his own conference. And I think it just really sucks that he seems to be trying to do everything possible to take it off the field. And rather than, we all love college football, we want to celebrate when a team goes 10-2. Greg Sankey would rather shine a light on and be like, well, did they play an SEC team? Like, that's terrible for the sport when you're diminishing the other brands. So therefore, I think the Big 12 and the ACC should diminish the SEC and the Big 10 brands. Yes, just because they're getting high recruiting rankings. And I want to say this, they should still play them in the postseason, but I do not think any regular season non-conference games, they should schedule them, because we've seen how the SEC and the ACC, we've seen how the SEC and the Big 10 are going to treat this. So I just think it's really disgusting and unfortunate how this information has been presented by Greg Sankey. And it sucks that he's trying to tear the fabric of the sport apart when we should be trying to celebrate and bring it together. So yes, I do not think they should play those teams in the non-conference postseason. Then we can try to beat their butts.
But can we appreciate the fact that Brett Yormark is kind of fighting fire with fire by making the comments he's making, by saying, yeah, he said I was going to be entertained by his comments. Yeah, I was. Brett's trying to make it very clear that the SEC and the Big 10, because as Cody mentions, the Big 10's letting the SEC take the fall on a lot of this because Petitti's been smart enough to keep his mouth shut. But the point is, it's been very clearly stated by both Jim Phillips and Brett Yormark that they think that the SEC and the Big 10 need to be put on notice. They're saying it for the good of college football. They're making it very clear who the bad guys are. So if they do pull that power play, it feels like the SEC and the Big 10 are teeing up. Guess what? The nation's going to turn on those two leagues. At least I hope.
I have a bit of a sidebar from JT. I think that there does need to be some semblance of a partnership, but I don't think that we should completely just play the ACC because of the perception angle. In order to take down the SEC, in my opinion, you have to beat them. Now, we couldn't do that in the playoff, so we need to take as many opportunities as we can during the season to beat them. I think the other side of the equation, we should be scheduling nothing but the Big 10 and the SEC while having some semblance of a partnership with the ACC. You're not going to be able to take them down any pegs if you're not willing to take them on.
Can I where I'd push back on the partnership word, take into consideration the optic of pairing with the ACC. I don't want to pair with the Pac-12. I don't want to pair with the sinking ship. If you are an employer, I'm an elementary school teacher, and Casey Anthony applies for my elementary school. Like, whoa, that name's on my desk. And you think, legally, she was ruled innocent criminally. So I don't.
Drake at Georgia, she might be Teacher of the Year candidate.
Right.
You really have to, you don't know how that goes.
So you start to think like, well, by association, I have now brought my institution down. I have now brought my entity down. By association, I think the Big 12, had they hitched to the Pac-12, would have brought the brand down. And that's why I don't want to be associated with the ACC. The second you associate with something that, because again, this is why I use like a Casey Anthony situation. We as the Big 12 lost our big dogs. If they lose their big dogs, it doesn't mean they're any different than us. Like they're going through something similar than what we faced a few years ago. It's just a matter of, man, do we trust them to handle it the way that we did? Because we went out and found the BYUs of the world. They're going to have to settle for USF
and the Utahs.
That's the problem, Drake, is they can't backfill to the same level the Big 12 did. The Big 12 scooped up everybody that you'd like to backfill with. And I know that backfill can seem like a negative connotation, but the Big 12 did upgrade in terms of all the additions. The 8 newcomers they've added in the past couple of years, all have been upgrades. And teams that if the ACC were to lose their big dogs, they'd like any one of those 8 schools to join them. And simply put, they're going to be looking and saying, we want to take on Stanford, Cal, like the options get real thin real quick.
Yeah, I agree. Coming up, this one is really fun for me, and Hatchie hit on it there a bit. Brett Yormark is he's had it. He politicked a little bit here, but he was pretty clear with the SEC that he's never going to agree and completely lay down. This is the Big 12 Squad. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is the perfect spot while the Thunder, it's like right now, okay, it is right now. Thunder and Pacers in the NBA championship. Even if you're watching this later, FanDuel is a great spot for you to bet on the second game of the series. Or if you're watching it right now, live during the first game of the series, because FanDuel makes it super easy to build live same game parlays, the biggest moments, and you can track teams and their trends. SGA, one of the best players in the country. Put money on him live. What would it look like to combine live prop bets mid-game based on how the action unfolds? It would look like much better odds in your favor, at least for me, there have been. How could a $200 bonus in bonus bets add to the excitement? If your first $5 bet hits, it can make your entire experience with just sports wagering in general better. FanDuel.com. Place your first $5 bet. If it wins, get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Again, FanDuel.com. Place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you get $200 in bonus bets. That is with FanDuel. Brett Yormark this week, fantastic. The close of the spring meetings, the Big 12, he sits in front of the media, and we heard from a lot of schools I'd like to get to later on in the show. The remarks we heard from BYU and their officials with the Jake Retzlaff situation, and I think from their lack of communication, you get a lot of communication. Kind of the quiet part speaks loudly in situations like this. But the biggest storyline that came out of this last week was Brett Yormark saying to the SEC, I'm not going to bow down. Like, I'll work with you guys, and I'm also not an idiot. I understand seeding 1 through 12 based on how good these teams are is ultimately good for college football. Boise State shouldn't get a bye, so I get it. I'm with you there. I'm not going to be stupid. That said, I'm not just gonna bow to the SEC and the Big Ten and give up.
Well, absolutely love it. They need to have a Royal Rumble throwdown. If we're partnering with the WWE, they need to put Brett Yormark and Greg Sankey in a ring to solve all of this.
Hey,
loser has to retire.
We saw Karl Malone and Dennis Rodman get in the ring at one point after that NBA Finals run in the late 90s. Why can't we get Yormark and Sankey in the ring again? Let's do it.
Can I go back to something we were talking about?
Give me Mike Gundy versus Kirby Smart. He can drink 1,000 beers. He can take on a rattlesnake, and he can use it to whoop Kirby Smart's tail. I'm all for this, Drake.
Going back to something we talked about, this is a little bit of a first segment thing, but I just thought about it. Guys, I'm new to the Big 12, and Jake is obviously as well a little bit more in this. How many times did Texas win the Big 12 in the last, 15 years before they left? One. How long have they been? And they've been in the SEC, and granted, I should say, they lost the SEC championship game to Georgia. They made it right away. So you're telling me a team that for so long struggled in the Big 12 and all of a sudden jumped over to the SEC and then rose to the top, and you just want to convince and tell me that this gap, and I know Texas is the NIL obviously aids Texas, but I could also make that point about Texas Tech, I feel like right now, and what they have a chance to become. I feel like the whole point is the separation, the gap is so big, but yet for years I saw Texas struggle in the Big 12, and even if they were trending in the direction of becoming a really good team, just like any team, they're going to have their lumps, and they would have gone through those same thing in the Big 12 too. Oh, if ASU had beaten Texas last year, it would have been longer offseason than the SEC, who already does a miraculous job sweeping under the rug how bad Tennessee looked up at Ohio State too. I think the biggest story from week one was how hard it was to win on the road against a really dang good team, and not as much as they tried to make it about these non-SEC teams just struggled when their own did too.
Well, that's the thing about it is they're trying to reconcile the fact that the Big Ten essentially has got past them, especially in the case of Michigan and Ohio State. They can't handle the fact that the Big Ten has stolen the last 2 national championships from the big bad SEC. But to your point, JT, a program like Texas that struggled for so many years to find its way to the top of the Big 12, you mentioned they climbed right to the top of the SEC or darn near the top. I'm interested to see how the SEC responds this year, if it's going to be more of the same, or if they'll back up all the strong words from Sankey and company with all their saber rattling. We'll see. I'm very interested to see how it plays out on the field.
And I know bowl games don't mean what they...
That was good enough to get a big screen, even though You talked about a couple points that UT fans are going to be sad about. One of those being all the aides they have going around to help them out. They might feel some type of way about it, but they needed the aides from the SEC to get to this level because they couldn't do it in the Big 12. At a baby, JT.
Trying to win over some Big 12 fans. But this is the also thing I just think is funny. Like the fact that I know bowl games don't matter as much anymore, but Michigan beat Alabama. Illinois beat South Carolina in bowl game. How about even if you say, okay, well, what about the regular season? If you go back to the regular season, right? Like Ole Miss, like I know Kentucky's an SEC team. Their only P4 win was against Ole Miss. So like you're telling me there's no way a Big 12 team, especially one that was playing like some of the top ones, could go over there and beat them? How about Georgia nearly losing to Georgia Tech too? Like that doesn't get talked about enough. Like that nearly happened.
You're completely blowing over the fact that Bama scheduled and beat the mighty Mercer in week 10. I don't understand why you're not giving them that respect. So.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, because they upgraded from the Citadel. Come on now.
Exactly. They'll circle back to them eventually.
No, they will. But the thing about it is, to your point, Drake, going back to the original point, I'm appreciating what Brett Yormark is doing here because he's putting them on notice. He is laying out exactly where he stands. Yeah, he's smart enough to say that, the 5+11 seating model, we absolutely need that. We need to avoid having the situation where a Boise State gets that first round bye because it doesn't do anybody any favors. But at the same time, he's making it very clear that he's not going to go much further than that in terms of seeding ground to the SEC and the Big Ten just because they say so.
It's nice having a commissioner that's not going to go cower off in the corner like some of our past commissioners.
You talking about Bob Bowlesby?
I would never.
What about Bob?
You being mean to Bob Bowlesby?
Nah, Bob.
My favorite Bowlesby interaction that I had with the man. This is genuinely weeks after Texas and Oklahoma have left the Big 12. We're in an elevator together in Waco, and he's got a lanyard on, and it's got all of the Big 12 teams on, all 10 of them at the time, including Texas and OU. I was like, hey, Bob, got that UT and OU logos in that lanyard there. How long till you cross those out? It got really awkward really fast.
Did he say anything?
Yeah, what was his response, Drake?
He was like, oh, I'm going to have to do that pretty soon. You just got to get super clammy and like tightened up. And it was one of those moments where super simple, super small, but it was like this culmination of how he was as a commissioner throughout his tenure, almost clammy and kind of non-confrontational and didn't want to tick off OU and Oklahoma and didn't have the backbone to stand up and say, we're going to keep you and here's the links. I mean, close your ears, Oklahoma and Texas fans. If you looked at Brett Yormark in the eyes when he was commissioner, in same situation as Bowlesby, and said, you keep UT and OU, but they want $10 million per year, that pot's going to have to come out of the other Big 12 schools. He finds a way. Like if we want to scale it like the ACC is doing it, he finds a way because truly, let's be real, the University of Texas is one of the top 3 public institutions in the country as far as revenue, size, spending.
Did you see how far ahead in revenue they are? They're 50+ million ahead of everybody in revenue alone. So just your point, it backs it up.
Right. So it may tick off a TCU fan who hears that and thinks, oh, we would never do that. But yeah, I mean, it's a business decision at some point to start to, especially when the gap is that wide, to have a pay scale or to stagger it a bit. And look, the CEO gets paid more than the guy who cleans the bathrooms. That's the way that it goes. And I'm not saying that college athletics should be like that, and you should really start this inter-conference turmoil there. But in a case like that, the ACC, if they could keep Florida State and Clemson on $10 million more per year, they certainly would, because those kind of brands keep your conference at the top.
Well, and I will say, just in a little bit of defense of Bob, though, things have changed so much. Like that idea that you just brought up would have been something that was insane around the time. Did Texas and Oklahoma announce their intent to leave when Bowlesby was still the commissioner? Just to remember.
Oh,
yes. Yeah,
we're sure. Okay. That's all. The only thing I just wanted to clear up, because I know it's obviously been a couple years, and I know Brett has been here now too, but I don't know, guys. I don't know if Brett would have been able to keep Texas and Oklahoma if he was the commissioner. I think those two programs seemed like they were just determined to get to the SEC. Yeah.
And the trajectory that was where everything was going, revenue wise, you just can't keep up with $55 million a year compared to $30 million a year. So even 10 wasn't going to do it. I think UT kind of had their sights set. Coming up, I want to hear from Jake Hatch, updates on the Jake Retzlaff situation. And I think lack of update almost gives you an update. That's the case I made on my show earlier this week. And then from JT and Cody, does this help open the door for other teams when we talk strictly football to compete next year at the top? This is the Big 12 squad. Jake, we heard from pretty much every high-ranking official at BYU this past week about the Jake Retzlaff situation and where the university stands. And where the university stands is we've made our statements. We've said everything. We're silent. And what this tells me is they're not going to pick, and they really can't pick a side. They're not going to come out and say, hey, we fully support our student athletes to the nth degree in that we will stand behind Jake Retzlaff in this situation and defend him until the end. And to the contrary, they did not say, we fully support and believe the victim, whether the case has been fleshed out or not, and we will sit in their favor. Jake Retzlaff is no longer a member of our program. Instead, it's that weird middle ground of, we will sit at stalemate until a year and a half from now things are figured out. And if that is the case, we've certainly learned that Jake Retzlaff's season is done.
Yeah, it sure feels kind of that way, Drake. The biggest thing that they've been citing is privacy concerns because there is a Title IX investigation going on as part of this. And when you have Title IX involved, that means the federal government is involved, and there's all kinds of different legalese and red tape that you don't want to cross a line that you just frankly can't when it comes to situations like this. But you're right. Them referring back to the previous statement, it was the thing I expected to come out of it. They were going to reference back and say, hey, we can't comment much further than we already have, and we're going to have to leave it there. However long this drags out, it means that Jake Retzlaff's playing status is very much in question for this upcoming season, because if they do let it go all the way to trial, the latest I'm hearing, well, I guess the earliest I'm hearing that this would go to trial is mid to late next year, speaking of 2026. So that takes out the season. If that really is what they're going to do, I'm very curious to see maybe over the next 30 or so days if some movement happens on that front. And I'm not trying to prognosticate anything because they would like to have some resolution one way or the other, I'm sure, if you ask them, give them some truth serum. But for the time being, they really can't say much more than no comment.
So can I not use names here? Let's think of a prominent quarterback in college football, Danny Smith, which is an oddly BYU name. They had Dan Smith actually.
I was about to say that fits right in with the BYU program right there.
But let's think of Danny Smith is the Heisman Trophy winner playing at Clemson, right? Yeah. And honestly, you can pick any of these elite Clemson college quarterbacks and just picture in your brain them accepting the Heisman Trophy. And they have another season coming up. Now, not to say, obviously, Jake Retzlaff's a Heisman contender right now. I don't think he is. But if that guy, the week after winning the Heisman Trophy, expected to come back for his senior year, junior year, whatever, is accused of something, I find it very hard to believe it's not in every headline ESPN covers every day, right? Quarterback at Tennessee, quarterback at Ohio State, quarterback at Texas. This is the headline every single day, and we figure out some sort of answer or resolution in far less time the more high profile it gets. I struggle to believe, again, fill your brain with any major quarterback who's won the Heisman the last 10 years, and then tell me we would wait a year and a half post Heisman Trophy, post high profile, post that to figure out what their status is. I do not know if I believe that.
And that's why I say the next 30 days are critical on that front, because that takes you to right around Big 12 Media Day time, when obviously the national media will be asking Kalani Sitake, Brian Santiago, all the brain trust from BYU about that on the record down there in Frisco. And that's why I think these next 30 days will be very curious to see if there is any movement on that front, because it might be the most critical 30 days, unless, as you mentioned, they're really intent on waiting this out. But it doesn't feel like that is in anybody's best interest to let it play out as long as it might.
Yeah, Cody, JT, again, we're dealing with obviously a very tough subject and a very fragile topic. So I want to clarify again, this is the Big 12 squad. This is not a true crime podcast. There are those who will cover this from a line-by-line case study. For us, it's the implications, and while our thoughts are with the alleged victims, our thoughts are with Jake Retzlaff, all involved. Our role as sports podcast hosts is to talk about the ramifications on the BYU football program and the bigger picture with the Big 12. Do you think this opens the door at the top for more teams to possibly compete and give you an opportunity to maybe create even more parity or chaos at that level of the Big 12?
Theoretically, of course, it does add more instability to the top of the league, especially in a conference that appears to be pretty quarterback driven. But broad stroke, I would say no, because it is still BYU. Even when BYU isn't the cream of the crop, they still produce guys like Taysom Hill and Zach Wilson and that Darren Hall dude. And then they have Jake Retzlaff, essentially came out of nowhere. Now, in a quarterback-driven league in the NIL era, you want to have a cornerstone that, if you want to recruit to this quarterback, it is going to help you in the transfer portal and in the high school realm. So you want to have that. But I feel like Kalani Sitake hasn't been overly competitive in the portal because he's really understanding of what he has. Is Retzlaff going to be lost? Absolutely. Yeah. But I think if anybody in the conference has proven over time that they probably have somebody waiting to go, it's probably BYU.
Well, and Cody, to your point, the thing you talk about BYU in the portal, Kalani's whole thing is BYU's got money. There's no doubt about that. They got money for NIL. That's just very clear. But the one thing Kalani's been very clear about is, we're competitive in NIL, but if you're coming here just for a paycheck, this is not a university for you. It stands for more than just paying guys to come play football because it's a faith-based institution. It's got a bigger purpose in the grand scheme of things in their eyes, and he's going to meld those two things. They'll be very competitive in NIL, and JT knows this as well as anybody. BYU took two of Utah's guys they would have liked to have had, and money was a big part of it, but more importantly than that, they wanted to be part of something they felt like was more than just collecting a fat NIL check.
Well, going back to what Drake originally posed about, like, hey, does this open up a spot? I think the potential of that is yes, potentially. And obviously it would be more likely that yes, if Jake Retzlaff does not play, it's when every time you lose your starting quarterback, it's not as likely that BYU would be in the top 4 of the conference. But I also remember a couple of years ago when Utah at the time had Charlie Brewer, someone Drake remembers very well. And then Cam Rising was actually ended up being the better option. Jake and I called high school games back in the day for McKay Hillstead. I'm incredibly high on his ability. Cody, you talked about the transfer portal. That was a big transfer portal addition for them last year. And that was a quarterback battle. Last year, too, correct me if I'm wrong, Jake, a little bit for that starting spot, too. So Hillstead's a guy, played at Utah State. He can do some things. They also added the Stanford transfer as well. So they have other guys in there that are capable of stepping up. I do not think you can cross BYU out if Retzlaff is not in the equation. And obviously, it's still a very complicated equation, as you mentioned. That's why I think BYU is making the right decision not to provide any updates while we still wait for this thing to all go to trial. But there are still a lot of intriguing options at quarterback for BYU if Retzlaff is not one of them.
And there are Cougar fans who will tell you that BYU won in spite of Jake Retzlaff versus him actually winning games for them. I would butt back against that because I thought he played a big role in a lot of big wins for BYU last year. But there's very well could be the case that a guy like McKay Hillstead does emerge. The question is, how quickly can you resolve whatever it's going to be, the playing status of Jake Retzlaff, so that he knows he's the guy and can prepare as such?
Jake, how much confidence do you have in the McKay Hillsteads, in the Stanford transfer, whose name I can't remember?
Bear Bachmeier is okay. Cody, you want to talk about the next Taysom Hill? Bear Bachmeier is the name to know. 6'2", 225 pounds, and he's a more of an athlete playing quarterback versus a quarterback who's an athlete right now. I think given time, he can really morph into a really fantastic prospect of the position. But in McKay Hillstead, you want to talk about a quarterback who's an athlete. That's McKay Hillstead. He's a true dual threat. Now, he stands 5'10". He's not the tallest guy in the park, but JT, you and I called games when he was $160. He is rocked out to about $190 now in terms of his weight. So he's got the weight to be able to hold up. The question is, like I said, how quickly can he really exceed to being the guy for BYU and ultimately, hopefully win some football games if Jake's unavailable?
And he was shaking 4-star recruits back then, like shaking tackles off of those guys, getting around them. So it's not like he didn't play good competition. We know Utah has some really strong high school football players, especially over the last few years. And Hillstead was absolutely one of them. So like I mentioned, you cannot cross BYU off regardless of what ends up happening with all of this.
Nailed it.
It's just a very enlightening conversation. Maybe we just do like Big 12 squad pods. Yeah, rhyming there.
Pod squads.
3 or 4 Big 12 squads a week and shrink it and have really very strong.
It was very strong. I almost didn't show up, but Drake begged me to come on. He missed me so much. He was texting me the entire first few minutes. He was just saying, JT, I need you. And I know you do, Drake. And guess what? I need to go back and forth with you two each week, buddy.
Whoever's editing it, clip that. I need you. That's all I need.
There it is. There it is. BYU fans, JT Wister's has one message for you. Just that clip over and over. From the aforementioned talking SEC and Brett Yormark to the entirety of the Jake Retzlaff situation to how we began the show. This was good. Thank you guys.
Hey, absolutely, brother, man.
Always a pleasure.
Always fun.
Maybe I'll just kick. I mean, I have the power to kick everybody else out next week. I can just make it us four, and we'll see. I'll pitch that to the upper level.
Yeah, no Cam, no Parker. We could just go down the list.
Yeah, there's just no chaos here.
Nick was here. Did you just not realize that he was?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, Nick, I should have added him. I should have put him in. That's Jake Hatch of Locked On Cougars talking all things BYU. JT Westersill of Locked On Utes. Cody Stovall, Locked On Oklahoma State. This has been and always will be. Thanks for making our shows your first listen every single day. Locked On the Dose Grande Squad.